Okay. So for very quick preschool promise updates, it is past April 20th, and you all should have received the preschool promise enrollment manual, as well as a link to the applications for next program year that Crystal sent yesterday. She also wanted to remind everyone that the regional selection process template, whether you will be planning for next year or will be working on this for this year, for the coming program year, is due on May 6th. And then just as a general reminder that while we are still in this current year, we're doing great with enrollment kind of across the state, but of course continue to support under enrolled preschool promise providers throughout this year, also knowing that many of you are focused on next year as well. Oh, and I see, Michelle, I see your hand.
Just a quick question on the May 6th. Tell me if I'm misunderstanding. So May 6th, we are turning in our selection plan that has been agreed upon by our regional stewardship committee for 22-23. And if we are keeping 22-23 the same as our current program year, we don't need to turn anything in that we're discussing for 23-24, right? It's just turn in what you're doing for 22-23, even if it's the same as our current program year. Right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
And if that's the case for you, I think the bit of guidance was to, in your email, say, we are planning for 23-24 or something to that effect. But yes, you don't need to submit full plans for 23-24, just what you're doing for 22-23.
And if we're doing something different, do we then, I mean, I know we handed in, but what does that do for 23-24? If we're already doing something different, do we still have to follow a different process as well?
No, you will not have to follow a different process. I think we would probably for the next year ask, are you making changes? Are you doing something like that? But the intent being like, okay, let's get on a bit of a regular cycle of how we do things. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure thing. Doing my best. Oh, and I see Alessandro made it in. Hopefully that's not just his name.
I did. I did one.
Cool. Oh, we're okay. And sorry, just getting confirmation that Crystal is stuck in our server. Oh, whatever this is. All right. Any other preschool promise clarifying questions on those super quick updates? I'm happy to take back or try to respond if I can. Okay. Then I am going to dive into our topic for today. So a little bit different than our usual cohorts. I have some slides, which given our issues with the server, I'll make sure to send your way as well. As try to read them out loud a little bit more clearly. For those who are able to be in on their computers, can you all see a presentation that starts with community coordinated enrollment plans? Thank you, Jillian, for the thumbs up. I appreciate it. Awesome. Okay. And Sky too, much appreciated there. So I am going to start with, for those on the phone, what is starting to feel like a very familiar slide, the coordinated enrollment key activities. So our kind of ideal state of the pieces of work that you all in community do that kind of represent the cycle of coordinated enrollment. And today we are talking about what is called the coordinated enrollment plan here. In our ideal timeline, or kind of like supposed timeline, this would have been due March 1st. and lines up with the grant deliverable coordinated enrollment plan that had been due March 1st. Given our delays with selection guidance, as well as our procurement delays with the expansion, Preschool Promise expansion RFA, we kicked those out to, again, May 6th for the Preschool Promise selection, and June 1st for the coordinated enrollment plan. It felt like if we were going to ask communities to plan, there should be some clear information from programs about what's being planned for. And unfortunately, we're not quite in that place. Begonia, I see your hand.
Yeah, so if we actually have providers that have unfilled slots because the area where they are offering services is not where those priority populations live, or for different reasons, right?
Mhm.
So is the ELD gonna come back to us before they actually renew the contract for the continuation of service? Or is the ELD not gonna look at those things and just execute the contract as it is?
Yeah, I believe there's going to be information about like continuation and what things will need to be true for providers and continuation coming soon. I'll put a plug in to make sure I understand and am able to share with you all what involvement about meeting priority population needs is included in that process too. Thanks, Begonia. I know that's something that's on a lot of minds, especially where under enrollment is pretty confidently because the slots aren't located places that will work or that families want or need. So definitely more to come there, and intention, I think, to take that information and use it where we can too.
Can I ask, Anne, I'm sorry, I think you might
Yeah.
have answered this already, but with the coordinated enrollment plan, if we're not making massive changes this year, but looking at all of that planning for change for the next enrollment season, not the upcoming, then that means we wouldn't be having to submit a plan because we're not modifying anything? Yes, right?
So that's exactly what we're trying to talk about today. So we have this planning deliverable. We know that we don't have the perfect information to have, like a fully baked plan, but we do know that there's lots of activities going on right now. So what I want to talk about is kind of like what we'd like to see, but also how can we get information about what's happening across all the hub regions with coordinated enrollment, while also recognizing that like asking for a plan this go round is a bit out of sync with the process we're all experiencing right now. Yeah, so the intent would be, as you're working together and developing your strategies and things like that, that we can move into having like a more planful place together, but this year wanting to kind of just document what activities are going on and what can we learn from each other about them. So thanks for that sort of like theming us to move around, move through this bit of discussion. Which I think is sort of like fleshed out in this next slide. Basically just, confirming that for the coordinated enrollment planning portion, early learning hubs convene regional stewardship committees, partners, families, to create community coordinated enrollment plans along the areas of coordinated enrollment work. So when we're fully sort of established, that would include marketing and outreach, that would include your eligibility determination strategies, as well as selection and placement. Again, this is in our fully baked full when we are on a more planful cycle. And just to be like clear about roles and expectations, early learning hubs responsible to convene partners, to document the processes that the communities determine they'll use to do the work of recruiting families, how the community will determine families eligible for slots, collect interest or applications and family preferences, how they'll match families to slots, and then coordinate a wait list, mainly how will the community together work with mid-year vacancies that arise, or families that aren't served in like a big start of program year time, but might wish to fill in a vacancy if one comes up. And then just to acknowledge the diversity of the regions we have in hubs. You know, these decisions that communities come to, you might choose to coordinate at the whole hub region level. You might choose to coordinate at a county level or a local, even more local level. Again, acknowledging we've got a lot of different structures geographically, and really just wanting to best serve families in all the communities, the hub region, and reflect available programs, service areas, and specific partnerships that you may have that might be in smaller areas or part of a larger regional area. Just allow for that flexibility. On the ELD's part, ELD is responsible for creating a template and minimum activity expectations for all hub regions. That's our phased implementation, which will be on the next slide. Responsible for providing individual TA as well as collaborative TA, like cohorts and things to complete planning. We will be responsible for revising and sharing program enrollment requirements. So most evidently the Preschool Promise Enrollment Manual being one of those. And then we're responsible for elevating exemplars and sharing resources across hub regions. Very specifically bolded here, we're not responsible for approving specific plans, strategies, or activities. So the way I like to talk about this is, you know, we might hold accountable to having an outreach plan, but we're not going to tell you like approved, put a billboard at this highway, or this flyer is what will, you know, meet these needs. We wouldn't, well, just I think at the state level, we do not have the expertise to know from interactions directly with families what information and how it's best received. And so that would not be something that would be part of ELD's responsibility along with these plans. So when we look at phased implementation, again, last year, we really focused on building up local partnerships, starting to work on coordinating recruitment, thinking about timing and how that might work, went through self-assessment, and started implementing, you know, some coordinated enrollment activities. In this coming program year, 22-23, what we're looking really at is really a focus on community recruitment and referral efforts. So continuing to deepen and strengthen the coordination of outreach and recruitment with program partners, using information about both the processes you've had and what you're hearing and would like to incorporate or change based on experiences of previous years. We can put a little check mark next to the complete a coordinated slot allocation request that was submitted in, gosh, was it November of last year? Maybe October. I'm never good at remembering months in a pandemic. That would be, again, to remind you all, the intent being, what can we use about what families, priority population family needs and preferences are to help in part of the determination of where slots will go. That's the intent behind you all doing that. And then the final is this create a no wrong door approach with an interest form or an application. This is more of a planning goal across this year. So how might you start to think about with partners, what information about interested families you could collect together, knowing that, just to be super clear for this year, that the Preschool Promise application is still expected to be completed for families that are enrolling in Preschool Promise openings. So again, when we're talking about the coordinated enrollment plan and the deliverable there, we're really focusing on what can we learn and know about your recruitment and referral efforts. So I think given where we are in our timeline and our implementation, our goals of this deliverable are really how can we more effectively compile information on what's happening in the hub regions around coordinated enrollment with a focus on recruitment, outreach and recruitment or referral efforts. And how can we better share examples of planning documents, materials, or agendas or something that would promote kind of that promising practices and sharing those across the state. It's not put here, but just to say, I think over all of this is a desire that I have to receive this information or get this information, compile it in a way that is the least burdensome to you all. So when we talk about what types of things we want to see, I'm very open into like how can we receive this, or how could we ask for it from you all in a way that's not filling out a template in a specific way. Just really wanting to have a sense of that. And I see Athena, your hand.
Yeah, I just had a question about the no wrong door approach. Is that a requirement for all publicly funded programs? And has it been communicated to other programs like Head Starts and OPK, things like that?
Yeah, I think the it's more of a like partnership systems strategy. In terms of like requirement, like I think it's sort of like what activities might you start doing that lead toward that kind of like no wrong door approach, or really like directing families appropriately. So I definitely think there's areas to communicate about coordinated enrollment goals more broadly and do that. But in terms of, I guess we're not necessarily assuming in this that there's one way of this kind of approach of families having access to the information they need and being directed with as few times of filling out the same information. We're not expecting that there's one way that occurs. And I think along with that, it hasn't come out so much as like a requirement by a program for that reason. It's more kind of a wanting to use family experience and family voice to help kind of guide that along. But I agree. I think sort of what and how programs fit into coordinated enrollment goal systems change goals is something that we can and should be communicating more strongly across our programs too. Does that I guess I'd be curious when you're what you see as a need, or like is there a particular way that might come up for you, Athena?
No, I think that's great. We've heard feedback from lots of hubs that the waitlist issue has made it difficult with some of our Head Start partners to be able to share all of the information openly. And so just having communication that level sets that this is what's going to be occurring without necessarily having all of the guidelines, I think is really helpful, so that, the different programs have the same information and are getting the same message.
Yeah, I know that's often a struggle we have is same message building on shared or creating opportunities for like discussing shared vision, shared goals. Yeah, I totally appreciate that there. Let's see, I see a slew of hands, but I'm going to go in the order. I think that Zoom is putting them in for a reason, which is Michelle, I see next.
Yeah, just to build off of Athena's question, like super specifically is the ELD giving like this slideshow, for example, to Head Start and to OPKs? Like, are they seeing the same hub and ELD expectations around this? Or are we to show them things like this? Like, are they hearing it just from us, or are they hearing it directly from you all? Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. So this these slides all come from the Coordinated Enrollment Implementation Plan presentation, which was given to hubs, CCR&Rs, OPK, Head Start partners, and is available if you would like to like reiterate or have a need seen there. So yes, and I think it's also an ongoing conversation. Like I recognize that seeing a presentation one time doesn't necessarily mean that it's fully absorbed and coming true, as much as I would love that to be the case. Next I see Begonia.
So, and can you go back to the previous slide about the form, please?
Implementation.
Okay, so this not wrong door approach with the interest form and application, could you provide examples where this is a successful approach and family choice is not being compromised? Because I've seen examples where community partners, they use this form and then they have a meeting to look at the intakes, and then they kind of like, okay, this kid for you, this kid for me, this kid for the other partner, right? So how do we go about this thing without violating the principle of family choice? That is my concern when I see this language and when I see it on the manual as well.
Yeah, I can absolutely keep compiling examples of this. I think some of where you'll see are in the Coordinated Enrollment Guidebook from other states and communities doing a lot of this work. And I think it's a part to me of this larger systems goals. And I'm thinking a lot about the regional assessment training that hub directors were in earlier this week, to say like these things have sort of that like pebble approach of systems change, but I think where we see a lot of success in this is how do we take those bigger areas around mindsets and particularly values around family choice, and that's not a like one and done. It's a really intentional long-term conversation. So some of what I'm interested in continuing to talk about is there was a request in the cohort earlier today to sort of say, what's a longer glide path look like towards like really actually making some shifts around the like shared vision and mindsets pieces that might make this an easier lift, or that really make sure that it's part of kind of an ongoing strategy, not so much a like meet this deliverable or this hoop at this time. How can we use this and think about it in line with, in tandem with the systems change that happens through all the work that you're doing locally too. And a part of that is definitely saying, what can we learn from other places? So I'll highlight those. Definitely check out the guidebook for areas that look good. And I'll also keep kind of adding things as I'm seeing them too, to our SharePoint. Yeah. And next I see Sky's hand.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. I was just still thinking about Begonia's question, because that's something we're wrestling with too, because we are going to have a universal intake or interest form or request for contact form, and we are patterning it off of what at least one other hub has done, which is to kind of meet regularly to go through all of the parent information that we've received and then try to figure out which program is the best fit to serve that family. But we do want to make sure that it's still parent choice and they're not sort of being assigned to a program. Of course, I like to think that on that interest form, we have built a lot of questions about the parent preference. And so whichever program as a group we, decides to reach out to that family first, it's not that the family can't apply with the other organizations or talk with the other organizations by any means, but who's going to reach out first and share information about their program and how it might fit the family's needs. Hopefully it's done on the basis of matching up with what the family said they want. So we're not like just going off of their income or something and saying, you go to Head Start and you go to Preschool Promise. It's based on the schedule they want and the location they want and the language they want and, you know, the type of program. So we're hoping that maybe getting some of those pieces, it feels more like matching to the family rather than assigning the family. But yeah, it is kind of a thing that has to be worked out, I feel like. So any advice or thoughts on that are welcome. And then I was just going to say, from a very nitty gritty, like logistical standpoint, one barrier that we have identified in our region was simply just not having partners have the hub built in to their release of information. So they would say, if the family's over income for Head Start and all of our over income slots, you know, under 130 are full, we share the information about Preschool Promise with all of them. Well, we all know that giving families like a phone number or a brochure or a website is not the same as someone calling them or reaching out to them and saying, you know, would you like to apply? Do you have any questions? And when we asked, you know, could that be a little bit more of an active like referral, like a warm handoff rather than just, oh, you might want to look at this program too. We were told that, well, we don't have a release of information from the family to share their contact information with you. And it's like, well, that's a solvable problem, right? You just add us to a form, or, you know, if you have a release of information, you add us to that form, or you have a new form that you ask families to sign. We're kind of building it into our application itself to get that consent to share information with Head Start and OPK. Because we want parents to know that we would be sharing that, but, you know, it's done with the purpose of trying to get your child to best fit program. So I guess that's all a long way of saying, just on a concrete, like really like, you know, task oriented level, if the division could really encourage Head Start and OPK programs to build hubs into their release of information or their applications that families sign to enable that sharing of contact information and those referrals. And likewise, we should do the same with Head Start and OPK. You know, that will just smooth. Nobody wants to run afoul of sharing parent information, you know, when it's not authorized. So.
Definitely. Yeah, I hear that. I hear that request too as well. And I do like, I'm just very aware of the timing, and I so appreciate you all asking these like big, tough questions around and really thinking about what's needed at both a state and like a state level that would support you in doing this stuff. I do really want to make sure that we have time to hear about the outreach and recruitment portion of this, and that I have time to hear your input there. So I see Athena's hand, but I think Athena, if you could share, and then I'm going to move us forward towards the outreach and recruitment stuff as well.
Great, thank you. I'm just echoing a question in the chat. In terms of unifying eligibility across all publicly funded slots, the applications on the Preschool Promise side would change quite a bit. What would happen for returning students that are 3 years old to not burden them with redoing a new application?
Yeah.
Are we looking at like moving to a fully same application for all publicly funded? Is that what that's going towards?
Yeah, I think that, thank you for that, and appreciate also you reading out the chat. It's helpful when I'm presenting and trying to make sure I can see you all too. I think that part of working through this is going to be, what do we need from the state level program requirements to move and shift? So for example, you know, right now we've got a Preschool Promise application. You could imagine a world in which we say, okay, for Preschool Promise, we need to have this information available on children and families enrolled. But maybe we are asking for specific, like, common information and not so much like use this form, right? Or submit it this way. And so trying to say, how can we at the state level, like, give enough leeway to say, here's the needs that this state program has, like it's going to be this information, but then also allow kind of a time, a space for the more like local regional partners to come together and say, okay, here's what we need from here and what else. And just to acknowledge, right, that Head Start's a federal program. They have federal standards. And so part of that is gonna need to involve, you know, some things that the state doesn't have direct control over, but certainly includes, I think, some strong pieces of sort of what is our vision here, and you know, how might we work together to think about how that gets incorporated, and whether and how each region might have solutions that work best for the particular programs and families in their region. Doing a little bit more of that, like, okay, enrollment is something that's inherently local. So how do we create the systems where the state has the things they need, and that local flexibility to really respond to what's available and what families are needing and wanting from services available for them.
And I guess with that, I was asking, and Athena, thanks for reading that out. I was asking more like, are we going to coordinate with Head Start and OPK to make sure that we have the same questions on an application like we've talked about before?
Yeah.
And I think that is the goal as far as I understand. And then since though that would include different and added questions, how would we unburden those returning families?
Yeah, I think if and when we have families who have filled out an application, how can we take what's already been given and hopefully not ask for additional information, kind of same way that we tried to, you know, that we do that with eligibility, right? Kind of once you're in, you know, are there ways that we can make sure that that's happening as well? Okay, seeing the time, I do want to guide us back towards the marketing outreach pieces. So as a reaction, I wanted to share with you all the types of information that we'd be curious about when it comes to particularly the goals of this program year, you know, sharing recruitment and outreach. So for those on the phone, I'll just read out very quickly. It's kind of 4 areas. The first is what is the region or county or local community that you're planning for, that you're doing coordinated enrollment activities for. Again, acknowledging that it may make more sense in regions to think about the planning work with particular smaller communities than the hub region, and then in others it's going to make sense for the hub region. Which ECE programs are represented in this outreach and recruitment work or activities. So Preschool Promise, Head Start, OPK. We know many hubs are also working with school district preschool, and then some may be exploring others and local options as well. So sort of what's the range of programs that are kind of coordinating their recruitment and outreach together. We had a suggestion from an earlier cohort to add which partner organizations are also a part of your activity. So maybe they're not program partners, but they're really key outreach partners for a particular priority population or a region or an area. We'd like to, you know, be able to name and demonstrate the importance of the partnership around outreach and recruitment, reaching families. And then the kind of meat of the final question or area is really to share, you know, any planning, any activities or materials that have been used or that you plan to use to coordinate your marketing outreach and family recruitment. So a fairly broad, really just wanting an opportunity to kind of say, hey, like, let's gather what's been working and be able to kind of elevate and share across hub regions what is underway when it comes to coordinating outreach and recruitment. I see Sky's hand and then Begonia's.
Sorry, I forgot to put my hand down.
Oh, thanks, Sky. Yeah, Begonia.
So this is really great, and I just attached a sample on the chat of one of the marketing or educational tools that we use for families and community partners. So this is something that both the Parent Advisory Council and the stewardship asked us to develop. But since your timelines and your contracts are off and they're not for 2 years, it doesn't matter if we create something like this that is very comprehensive and in 14 languages, we cannot move forward because the new information has not been updated, right? We don't know who the new partners is. We don't know who is part of the continuation of service. So I wonder, as we are developing things that are being asked by communities, so how do we go about growing these things and or not experiencing what I'm experiencing this year that I cannot even update this thing, right? It takes several weeks to put all these things together.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I think you're like putting your finger on exactly where the tension I'm wanting to like figure out a way around, which is like, we'd love to have these plans. We'd love to like, we have developed a lot of stuff, and what we don't have yet is the full picture of what we're going to do or what we need to do when it comes to recruiting, because there's unknowns around expansion. So yeah, I think, and I know if anyone hasn't seen some of the websites, I haven't clicked on this one because I'm scared it's going to mess up my presentation. But knowing that, I think many have already, created something that they're waiting to build upon, or to put in the next year information on. So how can we collect that information in a way that's not putting this expectation that you have information that you don't have yet, but that is really sort of saying like, hey, this is where everyone is when it comes to like outreach and recruitment, and how can we use that to like sort of understand and share where things are working, knowing that we don't have all that information in yet. So my questions, I think around that is really to say, is there other information? And this question is as though like I'm asking you to add questions to the previous slide, which I will go back to for those can view it. But just wondering, should we be looking for compiling something in addition, or is it is the sort of ask around what's being compiled? Is there something you would change about the ask or about the question there? Oh, I see Michelle.
Yeah, I would add in a piece about how the early learning division could help make those activities more successful or make those partnerships more successful, because I know a lot of the activities we're doing could really, I think, be more successful were our partners a little more informed from the ELD that they needed to participate, or if there was some follow-up on, that piece of their grant agreement that it is a requirement for them to participate. So I think that would be really great to add, just like, how can the ELD help in partnering?
Yeah, thank you for that. I want to make sure I'm taking notes on the right stuff so I don't lose those ideas. When you, as you are able, for those who can see the questions or recall, are there other things that you would either add or revise about the information requested? Okay, the next discussion question here was just a quick kind of temperature check in some ways. We know that many folks are doing things above and beyond the outreach and recruitment. Would it be useful to highlight having optional questions to talk about activities beyond outreach and recruitment there? And I saw Sky's hand go up while I was talking. So
it was more about the last slide. Sorry, I was still
Sure.
thinking.
Yeah.
And I was just going to share another thing that we've learned from our Head Start OPK partners. That's why, just regularly talking to each other is so important. And so one thing that has come up is that, we have a new shared interest form and shared website to let families know kind of hopefully a comprehensive resource about all publicly funded programs in our region. And we list everyone and, links, and we're doing this together. And as much as possible, we want our Head Start and OPK partners to really buy into this shared campaign and send the same message to families and have this consistent brand that people start seeing all over our hub region, that directs them to this one place. But what we heard from them is that I don't totally understand it. Maybe there's someone else who's more knowledgeable, but I guess there's some sort of federal requirement for Head Start programs to market their individual program. And, the federal contracts, I guess, don't really perhaps account for the possibility that you would buy into shared marketing, coordinated marketing and outreach. It's just assumed that every Head Start agency is doing its own. But if you have a region like ours where we've got 3 different Head Start agencies, and then we have a separate, hub, preschool promise marketing, you could potentially end up with 4 different billboards, 4 different bus ads, 4 different yard signs, 4 different flyers, and so as much as possible, we want to get everyone aligned. But if they're under this pressure for their federal grant that they have to do individual marketing, and maybe that's a misperception, I don't know, but that's what they feel that they are held to, then we're never going to get everyone having the same shared message. So not really sure what anyone can do about it. Maybe just some more research from the Head Start side of ELD into what does federal standards allow for in terms of shared marketing and coordination around outreach, but that seems to be another barrier.
Yeah, thank you for raising that. I think that's a real important piece around we have shared mindsets. It sounds like a fairly common agreement that it would be best to coordinate, but if your requirements don't seem to align with that, then there might be all the sharing that'd be a great idea in the ideal, but
right, you just kind of run into that, real world thing. Yeah. Plus, you have all the other issues of trust and proof of concept, return on investment, that it actually works, and for people to buy in, but that's just a very practical issue.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And Mina, I see your hand. If you're talking, you're still muted as far as we can tell. Not able to hear you, Mina. But if you are able to get off mute, feel free to interrupt me or share in the chat. Got it up here. Wow. So thank you for these pieces. I think really understanding the spaces that you all are working around, trying to solution, as well as really be able to highlight and things like that. The last piece, the piece I'm really interested about, is if we have how can we best kind of collect information? I think there's a real desire to not create a piece of work for the sake of something showing up in the same way. For me, or at least on my part, that's not how I feel about it. So we've had sort of 2 main thoughts come up from cohorts about how to best collect this information. One is to ask that we put together sort of a simple smart sheet template that asks these questions with open text fields and has a place to upload documents. And then also knowing that, especially about outreach and recruitment, we report monthly on what's going on. So are there some things we should glean from or reconfigure a question on our monthly reporting and be able to use that to share back out with everyone rather than a separate template. Oh, and thanks, Michelle. I see your question about family feedback too. I'll add that into our notes piece as well. Potential question. But in terms of how you all feel it would be easiest to get this information to ELD folks to compile and share with you all across hub regions. Very open to how we can do that with the least burden on you all currently doing a lot of work. If I asked you for your gut decision right now, could those of you who feel like a separate coordinated enrollment plan template put your thumbs up with your little emojis?
What would be the alternative?
To reconfigure the monthly reporting to ask some more specific questions about the activities.
Okay.
It's kind of already in the monthly report a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Parts of this are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I asked for the template. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, well, maybe I'm not understanding the choice, but are you talking about building this into the monthly report? And we report back on it regularly, or are you talking about a year at a glance template? Because I do like having more of a big picture document in addition to the monthly report, because sometimes there is activities that we're doing, at least if we're still talking about marketing and outreach. I'm sorry, maybe I'm a little lost, but if we're still talking about that, there are things that span multi-months or are like planning for future part of the year, and they don't fit neatly into like February to March.
Sure.
And so if that's the choice, if I'm understanding rightly, I would vote for having a template that's really kind of a big picture year plan.
I see. Yeah. And it could be kind of a false dichotomy in this time. Like, I could imagine we could ideally have like, here's our plan. And then a report could say like, where are you on your plan? Or like, what have you done this month along your plan or something like that. So there may be another in-between method. But I think if where we are right now is really asking like, hey, can you tell us about the activities that are happening currently? I think where some folks have felt that like adding to reporting would be a little bit better is because we're not really asking for a plan that might be a standalone document this go round. We're asking to compile the activities or the work that's happening. But yeah, it's kind of false. I know we are.
Okay, so it's less about like forecasting what we're going to do and more about what have you actually done so far.
I think that's the space we're fighting between because of our like incomplete information there. I see that we are at time. I also see that Mina finally made it off mute. So I want to see if your input's able to share.
Yeah, my question was how critical is, I know that I just kind of digress in many ways, but question is about the application form. That given that, like the Begonia's point, that we don't know who the partner is, we don't know which grantee will continue or will be added, and then there will be a parent in a family who has already applying for the coming school years. And then with this all shuffling time, in shaky ground as to how critical is it to implement a new application form?
How critical is it to implement for next year?
Just 22, 23.
Oh, I see. So that is not a 22-23 requirement. That goal would be like for 23-24 at the earliest implementation.
Then I misunderstood. Please
Oh,
disregard.
no, I appreciate you because we can't know what questions or understanding are coming away unless folks test and ask them. So I appreciate you doing that.
So, and a really super quick question, because I want to know if other hubs are experiencing this. I have a couple of preschool promise partners that are not thinking about expanding because they think that the RFA is not going to happen. So we actually reassure them that you face a few glitches and all these things, right? But we told them that money has been earmarked for that purpose, right? For the expansion. And so it is going to happen, but I'm not sure how restless other providers in other regions are, but it would be great if the ELD actually sends a message saying, hey, it might be super late, more than you guys are expecting, but it is going to happen, because some of them are not looking for a space, and if they are not looking for a space, they will be out of the game.
Yes, thank you for raising that. I'm taking note to bring that to our Preschool Promise folks for updates about the RFA. Thank you all for going over just a little bit. You in this cycle, we're the final cohort to give some feedback. So I'll be incorporating all those 3 pieces of feedback about the coordinated enrollment plan and sharing with you all through email and our SharePoint as we go. That will be the next bit of information you hear from me about the coordinated enrollment plan deliverable. And I appreciate Sky in the comments too, talking about staffing as well for RFA and expansion. As always, feel free to reach out to me, questions, particularly around coordinated enrollment, and Crystal as well about Preschool Promise. I'll take back what I got today and really appreciate your thoughts on just trying to get some information, share some information, and hopefully do so in a way that's not taking away from the problem solving and active work you're doing currently. Have a great rest of your afternoon. Appreciate you all.
Thanks, Anne.
Thank you.